A very good day. In this paper, we would like to look at the topic of Are Students Satisfied? My name is Veronica, and this is a joint paper co-authored with my colleague, Dr. Tamil Salvi, and both of us are from the School of Architecture, Building and Design, Taylor's University, a private university in Malaysia. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a drastic shift moving from face-to-face to online learning. So the question begs, are students satisfied? In order to address this, we have conducted a survey on effects of online studio-based learning on students in our university. And today, we would like to share some of the findings of this particular study. First, let me introduce the context by which we are coming from. As I've mentioned earlier, Taylor's University is a private university located in Malaysia, and it has offered architectural degree programs since 2008, offering Part 1, Bachelor of Science Honours in Architecture, and Part 2, Masters of Architecture program, both accredited by the Board of Architects, Malaysia. As a whole, Taylor's University, in the current QS 2020 survey, we are ranked number 89 in Asia. Our school has about 600 architecture students, and the academic team comprises of 22 full-time and 34 part-time team, where the part-timers are typically practitioners who are actively engaging in projects in the industry. At any one point in time, we are running 6 studios, each semester a studio, in the undergraduate degree, while at any one point in time, we are also running 2 studios plus 1 design thesis in the final year of the Master of Architecture program. Prior to COVID-19, we are already well supported through the Moodle platform for online learning. In terms of spatial requirement, the Board of Architects Malaysia have specified the need for each student to be being catered for 7.5 square meters of studio learning environment. I have included here a snippet of our studio space specifically designed for final year architecture students, which show or illustrate the diverse settings of learning spaces within the design studio. As we all know, architecture is very much based on studio-based learning. And the pedagogy of studio-based learning actually encompasses many diverse activities, ranging from field trips to shared physical studio, to expert lectures, panel discussion, pin-up, desk reads, formal juries, consultation, and all in all, a model for teaching design studio that is very much on the process of students going through a propose, being critiqued, and being reiterating the process. And this marks the pedagogy or the activities that we use in our university. And of course, that happens in the learning environment by which we call studio, and supported by ancillary spaces such as carpentry lab, environmental labs, and etc. And this is culminating in student assessment, which comprises of, but not limited to, models, drawings, design panels, exhibition, portfolios, and design sketchbook. And with that collectively, including how students experience the learning, this is what we call studio culture. And this is the essence of architecture education. However, in March 2020, this whole idea was inverted. Studio culture have been flattened to a 2-dimensional experience through the screen, supported by various technologies such as platforms such as Miro, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, and etc. Having said that, prior to COVID-19 pandemic, in Thales, our design studios are conducted fully online for 10 hours per week across 2 days. That is spaced out, for example, Mondays and Thursdays. And during the movement control order imposed by the government on March 18, 2020, the university have been shut, and we then reactively moved very rapidly and hastily to a fully online platform. As the situation eased and when Malaysia got into the recovery movement control order, universities were allowed to open in phases in favor of practical sessions for students, and also guided by our Board of Architects Malaysia, who advises for first semester and final semester of the architecture programs to be face-to-face. We have developed a strategy of conducting these studios fully face-to-face, however, with the sandwiching semesters of 2 to semester 5 being held online. And hence, these sandwiching semesters are conducted on a 50-50 ratio between face-to-face and online learning. And one of the important things to then consider is what happens to the new normal. Are we going to continue architecture education in this way? Are we going to revert back to normal? And so on. But before we get there, one of the significant facts that we would like to establish is, are students actually satisfied with online learning? How did it impact on them? Were there advantages and disadvantages? And more importantly, what is the new normal? How do we move forward? And with that key goal in mind, the whole idea of moving forward, defining what is to be the new normal, becomes one of the important agenda in the school, with the aim to culminate at developing an implementation model that is very much suited to the culture and the curriculum of architecture programs in Thales University. As part of this, we have created a list of emphasis that we would look at in order to develop the model. So firstly, we looked at feedback of online learning from the perspective of lecturers, and we did this in October, and we have presented the findings of lecturers' perception in one of the teaching and learning conferences, and the paper is currently in review phase. And today, what we are sharing here is the findings from a design studio survey towards students, comparing between student satisfaction of online versus student satisfaction to face-to-face learning. Besides that, there are other elements that are significant to our goal for the new normal design studio project. For example, identifying specific training needs for staff as well as students, to develop a community of practice for design education specific to academics, to develop toolkits so that we can maneuver and orientate students towards how we want to drive design studios in the current context. And with that, phase by phase, we are able to develop a model for implementation that is very much meeting the Malaysian Board of Architects requirement, benchmarking on good practices, leveraging from both online and face-to-face learning, as well as student and lecturer feedback. We are envisioning the new normal to be a hybrid or blended learning, comprising of a variety of activities that is delivered via diverse platforms, namely or generally into platforms of online and face-to-face. So this particular study, we actually started to look at students' satisfaction in terms of online learning. In the current literature related to COVID-19 and design studio education, generally there are 4 areas of research that have been conducted. The first is, of course, student satisfaction and experience, and that's given quite a key focus. The other, which is also central, will be the teacher's perspective, namely towards the curriculum and pedagogies of teaching and learning. And the third is the heads of schools' perspective of what the current and future trends would be like for architecture education. And fourthly, there's also a pillar on future design studio space. So taking the first pillar as the emphasis today, we looked into some of the research that have been conducted, particularly in the UK. There were a National Design Studio survey in the UK done by the University of Bath and have been published in several sources such as the RIBA Journal, as well as the website of the European Association for Architecture Education. And this is a nationwide survey towards students as well as lecturers of design studio. And the impact it gives to student satisfaction was actually quite dramatic. It has negative impact of approximately 70% towards students who have attempted the survey. Besides that, there are also other surveys, one done by ArchNet, looking at how schools are dealing with COVID-19 outbreak, and it has reported some of the findings. For example, there is a published article based on the survey that reports on how COVID-19 is affecting architecture students and educators on an emotional level. And there were also other news reported in the Architects Journal, which are anecdotal responses from students of different semesters on how they are coping with the shutdowns and the online learning. So based on this, we have created a survey suitable for our students at Taylor's University, which looks at, similarly to the UK survey, comparing between online and face-to-face learning. The survey is structured into 4 parts, the first being demographic information, the second being studio learning comparing physical versus online learning, and this forms the main bulk of the questions. And the third focus on the studio culture, or what we call the perceived importance and perceived impact of studio life. And fourthly, challenges and advantages. 230 responses have been collected from our students, and based on that response, I will now present the findings. So one of the first findings that we have found is the transition was quite difficult for 52%, almost half, of the students, while 1/3 of them found it smooth. Overall, there's still a preference for face-to-face learning compared to online. And you can see here on the bar graph that if we compare the fairly satisfied and very satisfied responses, overall student satisfaction for student learning fell 38% following the reactive move to online teaching. In section 2, we actually asked specifically for studio learning in terms of their satisfaction by comparing face-to-face and online learning. And these negative percentages here will be the variance between their response to face-to-face minus their response to online learning. And in general, in summary, most factors questioned were considered to have been negatively affected. The most negative affected being peer learning, what we see in the blue box. So all these student learning activities that relates to peer or the social context of learning architecture have approximately 40% variance between face-to-face and online learning. While moderately negative factors include learning opportunities such as group tutorials, reviews, individual tutorials, and lectures, as well as feedback activities in different forms. Followed by environmental factors such as the space itself and the student support in terms of connectivity, software, storage, and ironically, storage space is the one that gets a positive rating. Previously, storage have been an issue in our studio. So what does this tell us? It tells us two things. The first, activities related to peer learning should be kept face-to-face due to the adverse negative impact, while activities for learning as well as feedback need to be reviewed in detail to identify activities that can be delivered online versus delivered face-to-face. We also have extracted the data for semester 1, which we initially hypothesized that for semester 1, the impact will be far more negative. However, based on the feedback or the response that we got from the survey, the findings on student satisfaction for semester 1, who are the new students, are similar to the other semesters. In terms of the top 3 key advantages of online learning, of course, the first is flexibility. The second is time saving, cost saving, and resources saving. And the third is improved time management. While we found that the top 3 key challenges for online learning is poor internet connection, difficulty in group work, and not motivated. These advantages and challenges are consistent with the existing literature that is shared on student satisfaction and students' responses towards shutdowns in universities resorting towards online learning. And when it comes to the third section, where we ask students to rate on the perceived importance of aspects of studio life, the top 3 key aspects related to the perceived importance is shared relaxation outside of studio, shared relaxation in studio, and emotional and motivational support from others in the studio. And in here, we can see that there are tendencies towards deriving the need for us to build a sense of community, a sense of shared spirit from both an emotional and personal motivation support level. And this is very consistent with the top 3 key aspects of perceived impact. So based on what students think as important and as the impact, they have rated almost similar ratings. And what do all these mean? For us at the university, it means that we need to review the pedagogies and the current state. And we have already done that in the last 2 months, focusing on developing reflections from focus group among lecturers, to review the social and peer as well as personal motivation of learning, to review the needs of different year level, and to develop and customize a model. I would like to end with this slide. At Taylor's University, the School of Architecture, Building and Design, we have collectively developed a model which we call the DIM, which have 12 directives that comes through 4 modes: fully online, fully face-to-face, simultaneous meaning synchronous, online, as well as a choice of face-to-face and online. And these 12 directives are the activities, with 5 experiences which anchors this directive, which is the social, the intellectual, the ethical, the virtual, and the emotional. And you will also see there are 4 models, which for year 1, we would focus on the interactive model to build interaction and a spirit of community within the student. The second year and the third year, we will focus on the responsive model, while the 4th and 5th year, or namely the Masters of Architecture, we will focus on the holistic model. So this sums up a little bit forward-looking after the survey that our school have gone into to develop this model, and it is currently applied to our 2021 design studios, and it will be great at other platforms or at other times we could share with you this model together with probably a survey of how this model worked for us. So with that, thank you for listening.